In this next walkthrough, we're going to look at the actual implementation side of our RESTful web service. We'll try to split the getFlights flow into two flows, one that transforms the form post data into a flight request object, and the other that gets all the flights. Determine how to reference the web service destination and airline values. We'll look at calling the backend flows, and also how to test the web service in the API Kit consoles view and in a browser. Let's get started. First, we'll start off inside of the getFlights XML file, and let's bring a flow right above the getFlights flow. Now that we're above the getFlights flow, let's go ahead and bring some elements into our new flow. Now this new flow we're actually going to take a moment to rename. Let's call this getFlights from form flow. We want a flow that's dedicated in receiving responses from our HTML form and to essentially decouple our logic so we can also receive requests from our API itself. So what we'll go ahead and do here is drag up our HTTP endpoint. And now with our HTTP endpoint up, we're going to be receiving requests getFlights from flow right from here. We'll also bring up the JSON to object transformer. And essentially what we'll do inside of here is call getFlights via a flow reference. So I'll put in flow reference, drag in the flow reference component, and what we'll call in here once again will be the getFlights flow. Now this will receive the logic from the form, or request from the form rather, do the JSON to object transformation, and then call the getFlights flow, which will do the processing. So in short, these things should work as normal. Now let's go back to the MUA XML. And what we'll go ahead and do here is add a logger to the getFlights destination flow. So let's bring this logger in. And what we'll do is go ahead and add a breakpoint to the setPayload transformer. This way we can examine the response in a debug perspective. Let's go ahead and save up our application, and then run this application in debug mode. Once the application is running, we can come out and make a request to an address. Here I've made a request to the same address, but this time with SFO as my URI parameter. Back inside of Studio, we can see the element that has been triggered, the setPayload. Now let's take a look at exactly what's going on here. First off, we can see that in the inbound properties, we've got our HTTP listener that this came in on. We can see from the query parameters perspective that airline all was added. Remember, since we added a default query parameter through our YAML file, API Kit is adding that onto the request since no other query parameter for airline was specified. Inside of the variable box, we can also see that the URI parameter has in fact turned into a variable itself. This is great because when we need to use our URI parameters for querying or altering data in the backend, they're going to be stored as variables that we can easily gain access to. We'll go ahead and send the request through again. From the logger perspective, we can see where the payload has changed with setPayload, send it through again, and all is well. Next thing that we want to do is actually call our backend flow. So I'm going to stop the Anypoint execution that's happening from Studio, open up MUA XML, and take a deeper dive into this getFlights. So what we'd like to do inside of here is set up, inside of setPayload, a creation of an object that some of our backend logic will respect. So what we're going to do here is use a Mule expression to create a Java object that will then be sent off to another flow. So if we think for a moment about the particular flow we want to send off to, in fact, I'll go in getFlights XML to show you this. What we'd like to do is be able to receive these requests in and send the request right to the getFlights flow. Now, if you remember from earlier, what happens here is this getFlights flow expects a flight request object, which is great. You're going to get an example of how to use Mel to instantiate an object and use that object throughout various flows. So I'll go back into the MUA Airlines flow. Inside of setPayload, we'll make a new Mule expression, and we're going to use the new key and call for com.mulesoft.training.flightRequest. And this is a class that came in from your student files. Now with flight request inside of here, in the constructor, let's go ahead and add in the destination. And then after the destination parameter, let's put in message.inbound properties. And we're going to call from inbound properties the HTTP query parameters, and specifically the airline query parameter. So in this constructor, a flight request object can be made on the basis of where you would like to go to, and also what airline you would like to fly with. So these two items are going to be added to the constructor, and you can look up the flight request class where this will then be instantiated with. All right, so far so good. Next thing that we need to do is make sure we can call our getFlights flow. So to do this, we're going to add in a flow reference. In the flow reference box, we'll call getFlights flow. Click inside of the canvas, and then save our application. Now let's see what exactly happens with our app. So what we'll go ahead and do here is run this application in normal mode. And once the application's running, we'll start off by testing out in our console, then go to just a normal call through a web browser. Now this time I want to show you the console access through the browser itself. You might remember when we were exploring the API Kit router, it had the console enabled. What this means is if we go to our endpoint of our API, which remember is localhost API, and we call console, we'll actually get in a browser the console of our application. So in here, we'll go to get, and we can see again, Mule is hosting the full console. I'll go in this time and type in SFO and hit get. After that, I can see a bunch of flights coming back for SFO. Note that this is not the sample data. This is fully sorted based on price information for flights going to SFO. Now, if we change this up and we call LAX and ask for something specific like United, we'll hit get. And we can see here that we're now getting all the LAX flights for United. So now the console itself is making calls to the actual API, which is going through our back-end system in Mule. Now we'll also go ahead and put in localhost. And inside of localhost, we'll call 8081/API/flights. And just to try this out outside of the console to make sure we're not mocking anything, we'll go ahead and call for PDX. And with PDX inside of here, we'll also go ahead and add in a query parameter of airline, and let's say United. And now we can see all of the flights going to Portland via United Airlines, also sorted based on our Mule logic.